Spanish and English translation, enhancing bilingual competence of language professionals of ESL and literature, and also the seminar Spanish and English translation across the centuries, a professional seminar for ESL and literature educators. With this, we'll finish our process of our certification in translation. And I just want to remind you that it is important to keep our mics closed unless the Professor Rafael asked us to a question or need us to share information about what he is sharing with us. Up to now, we have learned so much about this topic, and we know that today and the 2 days that are coming, we will keep learning more to be a better professional in translation. So, with no further ado, we'll call on Professor Rafael Cardenas, who will take the lead from now. I don't know, sorry, I don't know if Professor Marisol wants to say something before Professor Rafael comes.
Well, not really. Just good morning, everyone. I hope you have a nice trip today. We have learned a lot so far. So, I just remind you that you have to have your pen and pencil ready because you have to take notes. So, God bless you all and have a nice day.
Okay. Professor Rafael?
Good morning, everybody. So, am I clear and loud?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Okay, very good. So, well, the first thing I need to refer to is what is right now um, online. Okay, and I'm going to be showing some of that to you. I'm going to be sharing my screen and showing you what is online. Let's see if I may share, because it seems to be kind of disabled here right now. Yeah, screen sharing is disabled. Uh, so if you could help me out there, that'll be very useful. So, well, in the meantime, as things work out and I can share my screen, what I'd like to say is this. This one and only activity that I posted in Classroom should have been received by most of the participants so far, because that's the notification I received after I put that together. Of course, not all the information that is that is required for you to provide has already been presented. We're in that process. This is so a lot of it is underway, right? That's what we're doing right now. Nevertheless, there is also um, another thing that I need to add is that the PowerPoint for from this presentation is going to go online in Classroom on Friday. I'm going to post the very same one that I'm uh, using for this activity so that you find everything you need if that is the case. And I got an interesting request by someone interested in learning if there could be some videos if the sessions are videotaped, and if those are going to be available, the recordings of the videos are going to be available for you to watch. I assume it is so, but this is something, of course, ongoing education or continuing education office will absolutely take care of. So those things are necessary for us to clarify early so you'll know what's coming, right? So thank you very much for your help on the sharing of the information. Allow me a second. Righty. Hopefully this is visible. So what I recently posted will come from Spanish and English translation enhancing bilingual competences. All this is, referring to our very latest module or module 4, or, self-standing uh, seminar. And I hope I'm screening and showing this clearly and here are your names. Okay, all those of you have already received being notified about the existence of the document. So I have your names here. I'm not going to go ahead and read any of those lists, long lists, because I'll be out of the question. But I do want to talk about this and read this to you so that you'll read it with me in case you have not been notified or you have not seen it. So it's under a heading or title, which is Certificate Program Module 4, August Seminar, Translation of Course Centers Only Assignment. That's the kind of title you will discover at the top. I am that at around midnight, I posted that. And the thing is, I'm establishing punctuation or criteria, right? Evaluation for assessment, because this is going to be summative, and also a deadline, right? Deadline for submission. So I'm going to go ahead and read. Please bear with me. I'm trying to be respectful here. I know this is very important, so I'll go through it. Let's walk it through. Please make sure to fully respond the following questions based on contents presented. Send your answers through the Google Classroom platform or directly to my personal mail, right? There you have my personal mail link. So you could do it either one way or the other, right? But try to be within the established time frame. It's only 6 questions. I'm not going overboard or anything like that. Okay, I have to say it. Find the questions below and just reply them. Okay. 1. What was the implication of Black legends based on translations and mistranslations of original works? Okay, what is the implication of Black legends? 2. What was the 17th century Black legend on Spain based on? Okay. 3. Why is legal translation major field of inquiry compared to literary and other non-technical types of translation, right? 4. What measures could be taken to avoid overuse or, sorry about that typo, it's overuse or underuse of passive voice in English-Spanish translation? 5. What are Hispanicisms and Anglicisms? How do they relate to language interference in translation? 6. How should cultural information made up by proverbs, phrases, cognates, and idioms be treated in translation? Mention at least 3 measures to be taken, right? So those are the 6 questions I'm asking. Type of assignment, summative, and essay type. Okay, so each one of these questions should be answered through a paragraph or 2, depending on how much you have to say, how much you want to say, how much you want to communicate or write. And then I'm giving some criteria over there. Proper writing's 10% across the board. Okay, across the board. That's like for the 6 questions, for the 6 answers. I expect you to do your effort to, avoid misspellings and those kinds of things that could appear. So inclusion of examples, that's 20%. That's examples based on your experience or based on what was commented here in session 3, use of the program PPT for answers. To be added here in Google Classroom on Friday, August 7th, 2026, that's 40%. So we just don't expect you to provide answers out of the blue only, out of nowhere. We expect you to go through the PowerPoint so that you get the chance to review some of the literature discussed here and the contents presented in the seminar's Module 4, right? Module 4. 4, and last, inclusion of personal insights resulting from presentations, 30%. So those insights are ways that you might connect what you've done before, your practice with the theory, right? Connecting the theory and the practice from personal viewpoint. That's 30%. So for a total of 100. Date of electronic submission and hard deadline. By hard deadline is we don't want it, coming to me beyond the date established. I'm establishing it here Saturday, August 15, 2026. So that's it, essentially. Okay. And this is going to be the one and only, right? The one and only assignment that we're going to be working on. So I am not posting the PowerPoint yet because I'm doing it on Friday. Okay. I'm doing it on Friday as a way for us to be, accountable and in attendance throughout. Okay. That's essentially the purpose. I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm just letting you know. Well, it could be policy. That's the same thing you do in your classes, I'm sure. Pretty much. All right. So essentially that's what I wanted to refer to. And now we will resume with some content that we left pending. Okay. So, however, before I get started on this, I'd like to know if you have any questions concerning that one and only activity, summative activity, summative assessment. So this is the moment for questions. Your questions are more than welcome and necessary at this point.
Hi, good morning. So I saw you posted it on, it is supposed to be posted on Classroom. How do we access that specific class or the assignment?
The assignment is right there in Classroom. A Classroom is our point of contact beyond the actual not face-to-face, but online sessions that we're holding during the contact time planned or pre-planned for the seminar. So for you to access Google Classroom, there must be a link and your name should already be in the list. I know I shouldn't be referring about any administrative matters, but payment, as Professor Marisol communicated recently through an email that I was reading, I think it was yesterday or last night. Payment, I think, somehow impacts contacting you or including your inclusion in the list, in the official list, because for us to report grading of some sorts or comply with everything, so you'll be certified and obtain your diploma or certificate. That is so very much required. Continuing education offices is kind of strict on this. Everybody is required to pay and send a receipt after payments been made, either through online banking, or if you could go over to the bank and pay through slip, and then you post that over to the office, and they'll include you in the list. I think it works pretty much that way. I don't know if Professor Marisol has something to say about that, because that takes us a little bit away from academic matters. But at this point, this is important, I think.
Actually, the classroom link is already in the chat. Yesterday it was shared too through the Zoom chat. So you should check if you have it there. And yes, if you have not uploaded your receipt, there won't be any means for the coordination to know that you paid, because whatever you pay at the bank goes to a common account. And in that common account, it doesn't say if this is for the seminar or if this is for another seminar from geography or English or whatever. So you have to upload your receipt through the Google form that the coordination sent you, because it should be in your mail. So that's
Good
it.
morning. Good morning. I'm Lourdes from Los Santos. I already did all of it. I have sent the receipt about my payment, but I don't know how to access or to get into the classroom because I don't have the link.
The link is in the chat. Have you checked the Zoom chat right now? It is there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Is that it? Well, go ahead, Professor Rafael.
At this point, all I have to say is feel free to say anything you have to say concerning any of these matters, because this is the moment to vent any of those concerns, right? Yeah, I'm going to be very honest. Seminars and certificate programs, in recent years, I think the requirements are changing. And little by little, we are moving in the direction we're progressing into, in the inclusion of more credits, and in order for people to obtain points. Just to give you an example, I think that was back last year, 2025. I took one seminar through ICASE over there at the Faculty of Humanities, fourth floor. And that was on academic journal writing. And that had some requirements for us to receive 2 points. However, I took another one right there with them also, and that one did not give me any points. What exactly it was that granted me the points? Well, this is something that academic offices could explain better. But of course, you're entitled to ask the necessary questions about all of this. So, yeah, in sum, what I'd like to say is that if there are, of course, credits or points involved, or summative assessments and this sort of thing, chances are it is possible for a 40-hour seminar or longer than that, 120, 160, and so forth, to grant you points so that you'll put that through the right commission. So assessment, evaluation, academic work commission. They would, of course, could grant you points, grant you at least some additional benefit in your favor, right? That you could use for either your professional growth, or whatever it is that your goals are at the university, at least at the university. I'm talking concerning people who already work or are employed as faculty in the university. Okay, very good. So, okay, if there aren't any other comments, I'm moving on with omission, right? Omission. So what did we learn about omission? Omission and addition are part of the same phenomenon in translation. What we know is that none of them are good, because that's a quality marker. It's kind of a metric used for measuring or deciding if a translation type of work is good or not. Omissions in translation, like additions, can go inadvertent or forced by syntactic, semantic, or lexical reasons. There is no escaping any of this. And you need to understand that based on what we have learned so far about comparative linguistics, English and Spanish, they have their very own nature. We know English is a little bit more precise, much more shortened, so to say, or of fewer words, better picked. Now, Spanish is a romance language. It's a lot more flourished, longer. Sentences are longer. The syntax is richer, same as in probably other areas, right? But lexically speaking, well, you'll have to consider seriously which one, to avoid. I would say an omission is a big no-no, right? And an addition is just a no, okay? That's a no. But sometimes it's necessary for clarification, okay? So we mentioned this example before from an Argentine president that if not the contextual, not the detailed information is available for the reader, we need to, of course, provide some asterisk and a footnote or a side note of some sort of endnote, which could also be the case as for the readers to know what we're referring to. So bear with me throughout, and we read here that the flowery and redundant nature of many stock Spanish phrases, especially when prescribed formulas are involved in situations such as speeches and business letters, requires omission when going into English, okay? So this below here is one of those tricky translations that could result from doing things literally, right? In Spanish, we write like this. So read below. You read within quotation marks. Without any other motive, I take this welcome opportunity to express you to my highest consideration and regards and place myself at your distinguished service for any other matter that you may deem convenient. All flourished, all extremely polite, but highly ineffective, right? Because it's pretty empty in terms of content. A lot of this tends to be reduced, okay? Because what occurs is not that things are omitted, fully omitted, but they're more like reduced or replaced by much more functional language forms that could communicate similar message or message that is relevant, right, for the type of writing. So for a U.S. Business letter, things like this are unthinkable of, right, and so forth, right. That's what I would like to highlight. So yeah, sometimes we face the situation that we need to omit things. So both languages, right, English and Spanish, have their own filler words, which add nothing to the content of the message and should be omitted in translation, right? So English also has some forms that are like extremely hard for someone to process, right? One of those is a category called doublets, right? Which are double words. Those are coming from Old English, really, where there was this need to include Anglo and Saxon words together for fuller understanding, stemming from the political and linguistic situation in the British Isles, right? That was inherited in America, and Spanish translation could very easily reduce that, right? That would be the case of a lexical type of omission that would be replacing a doublet, right? I try to find some of those later on. We're going to see a couple, I think, but this is a category you can Google by yourself, absolutely, and you're going to run into long lists of doublets. Those belong generally within some genres. One of those is legalistic writing. It's one of those areas in which doublets are widely used and widely accepted. Sometimes it's necessary to turn those doublets into a single word in Spanish. The same thing happens in Spanish among legalese type of writing. You're going to find this double terms. That's like conventional part of legalese. Okay, when you translate that, that could probably be reduced to a single terms that is accurate, right? More accurate and economic as well. So in other cases, prepositions and other individual words uh, have an idiomatic meaning, okay, which would not be translated and thus be legitimately, you may omit that altogether. So we see some examples here now. Okay, I brought in that something like she's on her way down. That if we were to translate this literally, okay, would be longer, could be easily, through omission, turn into something more precise, like ella está bajando, or speed it up, right? Which, if I turn that into, the idiomatic aspect of it, literally, then that'll be longer. Could be replaced by rápido. So, as was the case with addition, the translator needs to be aware of the possibilities and sometimes the requirement to add or omit to keep the translation accurate and idiomatic in the target language. Okay. So ultimately, it's the translator's duty to, make the final decision about what to include. But you should be as whole and encompassing as possible. Practice. Okay, we have a practice here. I would like you to invest some time now. Let's say maybe we could take some 7 minutes to translate these sentences. Then I'm going to be calling for your participation to, state what you omitted, and please explain what you omitted. If you did it for lexical, syntactic, or semantic reasons. Okay, let's keep these three domains handy and in our hand and in our minds also as we proceed to do this. As I suggested before, it's always a good idea for you to keep paper and pen handy as a way to help yourselves, you know, analyze better and much more thoroughly, right? So, in around 7 minutes, I'm going to start calling and discussing this matter with you audience. Thank you very much, and uh, grab pen and pencil, please. Okay, hopefully, uh, we're back, right? And hopefully we have completed uh, our translations. So, as I requested explicitly, we would like to listen to your comment on omission concerning three aspects, right? Lexical, syntactical, or semantic. As you know, lexical will be vocabulary or words that you decided, or parts of words that you decided to leave out. Uh, that includes, anything, any of the parts of speeches we all know. Okay, so that's parts of speech, right? That could be left out. That's also syntactic. I'm aware of it, but the lexical component is impacted also through grammar. The syntax or syntactic omission, of course, is also important. If you decided that you need to alter something or change something or rephrase something or transpose something or modulate something, that will be we generally go through syntax. Semantically speaking, it's also possible for you to change a bit meanings or um, you know think through on how to communicate the core of the message. That could probably be a, a very important force here. So these three aspects: lexical, syntactic, or semantic. Okay. So well, I'm open to your participation here right now. So what did you do with the first one?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I already told you that. Could be ya te lo dije. So we don't need to use that because by saying law, well, that is represented by law in Spanish. So we don't need to translate. We don't need to translate that. So law is really functioning as a direct object pronoun there in the sentence.
So what kind of omission works there?
We are omitting the pronouns. We are not using I, neither you, because in
That would be
Spanish we go,
syntactic, right?
yeah,
Syntactic.
it's a syntactic decision there, because we
Very good.
already
Thank you.
know that the person that is talking and the person that is receiving the message.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. What about number two? Yes.
Morning. For number two, I have you don't need to come tomorrow.
Okay. Is there any omission operating there?
Give me a moment. Well, the only thing that I see is that, for example, in Spanish, we start with the pronoun, but sorry, with the negative form, and in English, we use the pronoun.
So is there anything syntactic, lexical, or semantic operating?
I would say the rephrase part, it would be like a syntactic omission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. What about number three? Please.
Hello. For that one, I remember that you said that we have to think of register too. I mean, there's different ways of translating something according to the register. For example, you don't have to come tomorrow. No hace falta que vengas mañana. And it really depends on who you're talking to. In Spanish, you say, well, no hace falta que vengas mañana. You can translate it into English. You don't have to come tomorrow, or it is not necessary for you to come tomorrow. It really depends on the person you're talking to. And also, it will not be necessary for you to attend tomorrow. So if you want to be a little, more refined, really depending.
And will those operations fall under semantic or syntactic operations, omissions?
That will be syntactic because and also semantic, both of them because you are adding more polite meaning. So it really depends on who you're talking to.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Well, how about number 4? Or sorry, number 3.
Number 3. If you don't mind, I'll sit here.
No, we're going into Spanish, remember.
Yeah, I'm reading the sentence in English. And in Spanish would be,
Hmm.
So do we have any comments?
How about, si no le molesta, me siento aquí?
Okay, thank you.
O si no te importa, me sentaré aquí.
Con tu permiso.
Yeah, con tu permiso.
Yeah.
What I have, si no hay problema, me sentaré aquí.
Ajá, that sounds.
Okay, very good. So yeah, this translation that we are providing into Spanish, that could go, of course, at different levels, but there are all kinds of omissions possible. Some of
Is
them
omission,
are extreme, right? Very good. Thank you.
in this case, I is omitted, right? We
Pardon?
omit
Could you
I.
say that again?
Oh, we have the omission of I, like yo
Mm-hmm. Very good.
in Spanish.
Right. That is omitted altogether. Thank you. Very good. What could you tell me about number 4?
Shall we? Shall we begin now?
That's right. Good. Okay.
And
That-
also in number 4, we can use an expression, no? So what about?
I
Mhm.
have
What about starting now?
how about we start now?
How about, very good. Thank you. How about now, or shall we? Very good. Those are excellent, excellent replacements and loaded with omission. Very good. 5, please. She gave me a call yesterday.
Okay, she gave me a call yesterday. Ella me llamó ayer. So a
Mhm.
call, it's just the omission of.
Right,
That's
right. Anything else you came up with?
Me llamó ayer.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you. What about number 6?
Yes.
How would you?
I have a number 6. It was about time.
Okay, okay.
It's about time, yeah.
How about
It's
finally?
yes,
Uh-huh.
finally.
Finally.
Yes.
Mhm.
Very good.
That's
What kinds of
syntactic.
omissions?
Professor, Mr. And number 6, which one do you think is the best one? Because it was about time, but I've heard other translations. Which one is
Yeah.
the best?
Usually, what you will render should be economic. Okay, remember that we're talking not about being good. That doesn't, or being better. We're talking about being economic, first of all, and somewhat precise. There is no, good or bad, but there are better or maybe preferred forms. And generally, the translation that is simpler and more economic that uses fewer words. By economic, I mean the fewer words you use, that's generally the better one because it's more natural. We are not, when we're communicating, we are not saying all that information that we may think, may think that it's necessary. So, yeah, shorter is better.
Yeah,
Yes.
Shorter is
I've also heard
Thank you.
that same phrase, but it's in spoken language. They say about time, but they don't say the it was. They don't put the grammar in front. They just shorten it and say about time you did that, something like that. But of course, if we're writing, it's different, right? It has to be like more grammatical.
Well, maybe if we are in economical, we will say just, as somebody said, finally, one word.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and if you say finally, what kind of omission is going on there? What kind of omission? Syntactic, semantic, or lexical? Which
was
one?
they rephrased it, totally rephrased.
It's lexical.
So if you ask me, that could be both syntactic and semantic. Okay. What did you do with number 7?
La reunión finalizó más temprano de lo esperado.
Okay. So is there a way for us to make it
Oh,
less than that?
La reunión terminó antes de lo
terminó. Oh, yeah. La reunión terminó antes de lo previsto o de lo esperado.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
The meeting have finished.
Meeting is over, or over before, and so forth. So there are different possible ways for us to mean the same and omitting less, right? Very good. As long as it refers to some event, the shortest is usually the best one. Okay, so what
also,
about 8? Uh-huh.
in that one, also you have add meaning being shorter with the tone of voice. Ya se terminó.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and then the people will ask surprise. Ya.
Right,
It really depends on the situation.
right, right.
Professor, something that we need to take into account is when we make a comment or express something, we put intonation, and intonations denote meanings, right? It is a falling or rising intonation, what you're saying, how you're saying the things, who are you talking with. So here we are meeting the intonation, right? So we are trying just to simulate, if that is a question, or it could be, I don't know, a tag questions, or it could be just a statement. So it depends on, right, intonation. So intonation is a key component. And here we are supposing reading something, but we don't know exactly, how it sounds.
Right, right. Generally, we can do very poorly. I'm talking about translation, about that aspect you just mentioned, because what carries over into writing in terms of emotion or, that other dimension of communication, that is intonation and it's made by prosody, it's
That's right.
just transferred through punctuation points. So you see, it's only number 6 that you have exclamation points, or number 4 that has
Question mark.
question marks and so forth. But the rest of them tend to be pretty simple. Simple.
Plain, right? We don't
Yeah,
know exactly. They are so plain. So
exactly.
that's
Yeah,
right.
and,
That's
and
what
the
I want to
register
say.
is low because it's colloquial. There could be some way, right? So generally transcribing conversations is challenging because of this, because essentially you'll need to use some coding in order to communicate what was the emotion communicated, or that part
Yeah, the
exactly.
speaker's attitudes, right? That's what I said.
This is so true. This is so true.
That's right. Thank you.
You, thank you. because this is a very good observation. Very good. What about lo vi con mis propios ojos? How would you put that in English? Without omitting, of course, or omitting effectively.
Mm. How about I saw it myself?
This is pretty effective because it's common everyday language working. Okay, very good. Thank you.
I saw it with my own eyes. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing there is it, since it says lo vi, it could be a thing or it could be a male. So it could be I saw him with my own eyes or I saw it with my own eyes.
So yeah, this is the witness perspective way of speaking. What other omissions did you work out or
Hello, good
translations?
morning. Good morning.
Mhm.
Hi.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Okay. I would say I saw it. Just I saw it. Because if I say I saw it myself, that is a redundancy.
But we have the phrase with my own eyes. That phrase exists in English.
Well, you can't see with the other eyes. You have to see with your own eyes.
Yeah, but that's colloquial English, actually. I saw
Yeah,
it
it's an
myself.
expression.
It's a fixed expression that people express in English. And
It's
Mhm.
emphatic. It's empathy.
It's to emphasize the situation.
Yeah, I saw it myself.
yeah,
What about I witnessed it myself? Kind of like I was able to see it with my own eyes, sort of the same connotation, but probably, as mentioned before, it depends on the context in which it is used. So what about that?
I can say concerning everything you're presenting here is that all of that is pretty germane. It's pretty good because as long as you preserve the message, or the meaning is preserved, it works. And you are, providing different options. They're all effective, I think. So we cannot say about what is good and what is bad. No, no, we don't really need to get into all of that, right? What works and what doesn't work really. And most of what you're saying works really. Thank you very much for your contributions. What about 10 or 9, sorry? 9 and 10.
Mine is, temo no poder ayudarte. Temo no poder ayudarte.
that's good.
Right,
O me temo que no puedo ayudarte.
right. Any of those are very
Lamen
kind.
yeah,
Mhm.
lamento no poder ayudarte.
Right,
It's a
very
polite.
kind
Mhm.
refusal.
Yes.
There's an element of politeness there, but
Yes.
what you're doing is you're refusing.
Yes.
Yes.
You're
Sure.
refusing help.
Mhm.
Okay. In 10,
10.
I forgot to call you.
mhm, okay. I think here it's a little bit harder to omit something, right?
Yeah.
Se me olvidó llamarte. Okay, very good. All right. So I decided to bring in from my source the analysis, right? So let's take a look. So for number one, leaving I out or omitted, ya te lo dije, right? Ya te lo dije. It's like a way for a person to know that, and there's this emphasis on the already, right? We spoke that already, right? This is a syntactic omission from English into Spanish. Two, no hace falta que vengas mañana, right? From Spanish to English. don't translate hace falta literally, and it doesn't make lack, right? So sometimes a translation that goes along the filters of a machine translation would appear something as such, like it doesn't make lack, right? Right. So of course that's a big mistake, and a humanized or language processing software or a person, of course, would provide something much more appropriate to a context, right? So it is unnecessary, as we said, at a higher register, or it's not necessary at a lower register that you come tomorrow.
So,
So we have semantic elements here involved.
yeah.
Professor, Marisol, you
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah.
say something, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
you just said it. You just said it. We have semantic elements there. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Go ahead. You just said it, Professor.
Oh, all right, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, and you said it first. You said it first. Okay. Regarding number 3, if we read here, it says, if you don't mind, I'll sit here. Okay. Okay. The subject I is omitted. There's syntactic omission here, and we cannot over translate politeness. This politeness element, as it was rightly mentioned before, sometimes we need to take that into account very much, because this, if you don't mind me, or right, if you don't mind me, this is should probably be considered a semantic omission, probably. Okay. 4. ¿Qué tal si empezamos ahora from Spanish to English? So the literal rendering, ¿qué tal? What about? Um, um,
Voy a llevarle,
could
voy a
be
llevarle los
omitted.
exámenes a la para
Okay, could be omitted. All right. So we need to be careful over there. Okay. Concerning, for example, she gave me a call yesterday from English into Spanish. We have that's according to the notes here, it's necessary to avoid translating uh, and gave literally like me llamó, right? Okay. Okay. Me dio una llamada, that'll be wordy. Much more appropriate, me llamó. Okay. 6, ya era hora. English to Spanish into English. So don't translate era, right? That word. We must, as you rightly said, an expression such as about time, right? About time, or it was about time, and so forth. Different possible renderings that you provided here are just fine. And do not avoid or omit, sorry, that much, right? So the meeting ended earlier than expected. From English into Spanish, the article before expected doesn't need an equivalent, right?
no sé.
That than, right? Than. So de lo esperado, right? So we can even leave that out altogether. Can be fully omitted, right? So, and say something like la reunión terminó antes. That's it. 8. Lo vi con mis propios ojos, from Spanish into English. So own, okay, my own eyes as own may be optional in some contexts. So I saw it myself, okay, as you rightly said, right? As you rightly said. Some of you are in tune with all of this, and intuitively, that's a very natural way for you to provide language based on experience and based on the command of language, that you may say it economically. I saw it myself. 9, I'm afraid I can't help you. Okay. So from English into Spanish, we should or could omit the literal meaning of I'm afraid. No? Use instead lo siento or no puedo when appropriate. No me temo, o tengo miedo, or anything like that. So, because that'll be, besides the question over here. Se me olvidó llamarte. So, from Spanish into English, don't preserve the reflexive structure literally, right? Se. I forgot to call you. There isn't much we can do about it. That's, I think, the best possible translation. Okay. Now we're going to do fully into Spanish. Please, I recommend you to take maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, and we'll do some more side translation. Okay. So I'm going to bring us back to what we said before concerning omission, right? Omission is looked down on, right? Uh, that's a marker of poor quality in translation generally. Addition may be necessary, but cannot be overused. So this is the general criteria, what I just expressed here. So considering that, how would you handle these 5 sentences from a syntactic, lexical, or semantic perspective? How would you go ahead and provide a rendering that is not a that is respectful of the original? How would you go ahead and do it? Anybody, please. Number one.
Number one, me levanté temprano para tomar el primer bus o autobús. Me
Right.
levanté temprano para tomar el primer autobús.
So here the change operates in not a because, but
Yes,
more like
that is
at,
para, which is the
right.
end.
So exactly, some subordinate or some word like because could be very easily replaced by preposition
Right.
that would be linking things more effectively, and of course that generates somewhat of an omission. That is well, not necessarily an omission, but a replacement more than anything. That is syntactic, right? Uh, okay. Yeah, concerning purpose here. Anybody else?
Well,
Yes,
many
Joan
people,
Thomas. Yes, you want to say something?
Joanne,
Joan, I think she wants to say something, but I cannot. She doesn't say hello. Okay, well, let's move on to number two. So I grab a cup of coffee and head it out. How
I
would
have
you? Mhm.
tomé una taza de café y me fui.
Right, right.
How about,
Other,
yeah,
mhm.
tomé una taza de café y salí.
Right, right, right.
And I just wanted to say, it says I grabbed y no agarré, but that, it's understood that is actually drank. So
Mm, mm.
Y me tomé un café y me fui o salí.
Very good. Okay. So what you have over there is semantic or syntactic, or is it lexical? What happened?
say lexical.
Probably lexical. Okay. Me tomé un café. Okay, very good. Y salí. Okay. It's also syntactic. Okay. How about number 3? It was raining, but didn't
Yeah, I
really
wanted to
mind.
refer to the previous one.
Uh-huh.
Agarré un café y me fui, that Professor Williams, I think, said. Agarré un café y me fui. Actually, that's very Panamanian. We use agarrar for many things. Agarré el bus, agarré el café. That's very Panamanian.
Very
And
good.
that's,
Very idiomatic.
yes, very idiomatic.
Very idiosyncratic too.
Yes.
So what can you say about it was raining, but it didn't really mind?
Okay, we can say estaba lloviendo, pero no me importó.
What about llovía, pero no me molestó?
Okay, those are effective. But we could also transpose here, right? No me importó que estaba lloviendo, right? And that also works. Okay, very good. What about number 4?
I have una mujer me sonrió, así que le sonreí.
Y yo le sonreí.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please. Randy, do you want to say something concerning number 4?
Yeah, well, it was about number two, actually.
It was about number 2? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, very quickly. Um, I'm wondering why do we say of coffee instead of with coffee?
Could you repeat that again? I could hardly listen to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hardly listen to you, Randy. Could you say that again?
Hello, can you hear me?
Could you say that again, please?
He's chatting that he has problems to speak or for us to listen him.
Yeah, let's try to use voice at right now, since we're all looking at the same. I think it's a lot more effective right now if we could comment. Just an observation, of course, very respectfully. I would recommend us only to comment here. As we're in live. So yeah, going over to the chat, that'll be like extra burdensome, right? So let me know. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Randy? Okay, anybody else, please? Concerning 4 and 5, please.
Number 5 would be cuando llegué, ya todos se habían ido.
Right. Cuando llegué, okay, good. So yeah, what's operating over there, Katia? Is that the syntactic or semantic omission you're doing there?
Yes, by the time cuando llegué, o sea, that's an omission of wording. It's too wordy there. Todos se habían ido.
Okay, so that'll be more what's lexical?
It is lexical and I think also syntactic.
Syntactic. Okay, thank you very much.
What
Well,
about llegar?
sure.
Al llegar,
Mm-hmm.
ya todos se habían ido.
Very good. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your contributions. As you can see, we can speak in terms of being right or being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What we're talking about is what is functional and what is not functional. Most of what's being offered here is very functional. Nevertheless, it's important to bear in mind that omissions are just not welcome. That's the way translations are rated, right? We should not be leaving out information and not adding so much. Very good. We need to move on. But of course, I have some comments here or some additional observations. Take a look, please, and let me know if you have a question. I'm not going to read through this, but this was extracted from the source out of which I obtained the original sentences. So we have some comments here. So let me know if any of these is foreign or strange to you.
Professor, just a comment. So when you said about omission, so omission is a technique that when we use it, the text will sound more natural in the target language. In this case, English, right? Because Spanish is much more wordy than English. So that's what I want to make a comment. So it's just the way that's what you are saying, right? Nevertheless, of course, we need to take into account the context. But in this case, we are practicing omission because the way it sounds more natural in the target language. I'm not talking about accurately, but I'm talking about natural, like the natural way of speaking. That's what I want to.
Right,
Uh,
exactly. This is
that's
a
what.
very nice observation. Thank you.
I would like to comment for number 5. It's very common that we hear like, cuando llegué, no había nadie. It's a very common expression.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. If there is anything else, you just go ahead and say it because remember, it's not that we're right or wrong. We're dealing with what works and what doesn't work. Generally, most of what we produce works because it communicates the message. But omission is still a phenomenon, right? It's still a phenomenon because it's something that we cannot avoid, really. That's what we're learning about it right now, or not learning, but that we're recalling that we have this limitation, ingrained in the translation process, that some information is going to be missing or should be sacrificed by being left out, right? We need to decide or exercise some judgment as a translator not to leave out essential information. We have another one over here. Let's do some site translation here. Let's not take any time because since we've been doing, I think, the same thing, I think we can do this automatically. Let me know your impressions concerning these. We have 5 here, 5 more. So, is there anybody who would, willingly tell me? This is more challenging because this is into English, right? We all know it's our L2. Okay, so it's important. It's important to
I can say like
render something good. Uh-huh.
I don't know if I can say I got up early to make the most of the day.
That sounds pretty good. Did you sacrifice anything?
I got up early to make the most. Yes, I am aprovechar. Just to make the most, I using like a more colloquial way of saying that just to porque aprovechar is like to take advantage. It's too literal.
Make the most of the day. Exactly. That's pretty idiomatic. So it falls in the semantics. Thank
Yes, but
you.
it's yes.
Mhm.
Also because maybe the context is also like a colloquial one because if I'm using I'm talking to someone, me levanté temprano. It's not a formal way of expressing, and it's not academic language either. So I think that could be used to make the most.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anything we could say concerning number 1? Anything else? Or anybody else?
Is it proper to say I woke up early to take advantage of time? I think that the idea, I'm thinking about how I could take advantage of time.
All right. All right. Yeah, that's within the possibilities. Absolutely. Take advantage of a time. Yeah, time time of the day. Probably that's what um you would mean. That'll be in,
Yes, exactly.
some replacement probably, not necessarily an omission, really. Thank you. Thank you for your observation. That's uh, it's another look at the same sentence. What about number 2? Se me olvidó cerrar la ventana.
I forgot to close the window. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that you would consider for number 2?
Oh, just if you want to be a little bit more formal for that one, I neglected to close the window.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else's version? or rendering. Okay. Let's move on into number 3. How would you perform this invitation? Because it's an invitation.
How about a movie?
Okay, that's pretty good. Thank you very much.
Feel like going to the movies.
Hmm. Is there any omission in any of those two versions?
I only use the word movie.
Hmm. So you're omitting lexically,
Hacia
syntactically.
presente y así. Yeah, I said, how about a movie?
Hmm. Okay. So
Professor, do you feel like going to the movies?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
gonna say something like that, but
Do
without the
you
do.
feel like going to the movies?
Feel like going to the movie, yes.
right,
Hmm?
right. So a lot of this is pretty semantic and syntactically omission, laden to some extent. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions. And this one, of course, fulfills the role of, you know, helping us understand the situation. This is an invitation. So, from a pragmatic perspective, we know we must add some intonation to this. And how about number 4?
Great you
I'm glad you
came.
came.
Okay.
Good
I'm
you can
glad
make
you
it.
came. I'm glad you came.
Yeah. What about good you make it?
Good. Exactly.
I'm glad
So,
you came.
yeah.
Great that you
Highly idiomatic. Very good. Both
Yeah.
are highly idiomatic. Qué bueno que viniste. Qué bien que viniste. Becoming glad you made it, or glad you came, or I'm glad you came. This is all very idiomatic. Very good. Very semantic type of translation. This is sophisticated, I would say. This is what would be labeled as good. Okay. How about number 5?
it's time to leave.
Oh, it is time, or is
It is time, or it was about time, or it could even go as something like at last, even that. So highly idiomatic and highly semantically oriented. Okay. So omission is tricky, right? As we have learned. This is the key takeaway from this on omission. It's like when you see the title of a play or the title of a movie, right? You're gonna look at some things that are they just come out of anywhere. But those could be considered possible renderings because they're very natural. So as it seems, naturalness sometimes is a standard, and sometimes you may leave things out. So you will adjust to the task, right? And the type of translation that you need to do. That is why we've been talking about the difference between technical and non-technical translation, considering, for example, legal translation to be technical, much more precise, in which precision and accuracy matter a lot. But this other type that we're talking about right now, which is non-technical, uh, are which transcriptions and literary kind, they, there is much more freedom of not being so precise. So omission tends to appear more, right? That's the situation with what we're dealing with here. I'd like to know if you have any comments uh, concerning this, or question, or something you have learned out of your readings, out of the your experiences.
well, I do have something here in my mind. It's like when I'm translating a dialogue, like in a literature piece, I always consider the character that is saying the phrase. Depending on the character, I would change a little bit the because I want to reflect the person that is saying that phrase. So it's not the same translating an intellectual or a person in a formal situation than translating a young person in an informal situation. So I was thinking about that. What do you think about it?
Very good observation. And it's very, very appreciated because this is so true. We need to respond to the task, right? That's what we, as translators, must become aware, gain this awareness that we need to do it according to what is required of us or what the possibilities are. Well, very good. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just have a comment. I would like to know also your opinion. What now we're talking about omission is much more frequent in when translating, well, translating from Spanish to English. Omission is much more standard in English than, for example, addition in Spanish, because Spanish is much more worthy than English. Talking about the techniques that we are using now.
So, are you asking me for my opinion?
Yes, I would like to know about your opinion about this.
Well, mhm. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes there is no way we could avoid adding some information, but we have to do it in a way that is not obstructing the flow of a message. So that could very well go in writing, of course, because we're speaking about translation at a bottom, maybe at the end, sometimes on the side. As I was saying before, sometimes it's unavoidable adding information. This is a challenge always. And it's better to have to say more in order for the reader to understand all the information. One of the reasons why humor and comedies are inconsistent is because there's so much implied, and we cannot expect an audience to understand all the implications of a comment or a silence or a filler or any other form of communication, either verbal or non-verbal. I think it's always necessary, right? The best example that you can see of a filler is when you have this comedy shows that you hear the laughter at in the background. That's designed to help the audience, to lead the audience into the nature of the show. But now, well, some people now complain that that's kind of disruptive and that we should allow appreciation. And now you see that, for instance, on TV and movies, uh, many things are now never translated and they're presented in their original language, be it Korean or Russian or whatever. And if you got it, you'll get it naturally, as it is said. And if you don't get it, well, you'll miss that part altogether because of you. And that takes us back to what we were speaking about yesterday, that many people take translation and interpretation for granted. They're expecting someone to tell them everything, right? That is the expectation. Now, if you ask an American, generally, the way they think is that you have to satisfy the customer. Okay. People must be, explained everything in detail. That's the way they see things. But if you talk, for example, to someone from Europe, maybe British, they may not agree. So if you don't understand, you don't understand because you are not trained to attend or watch or listen to certain things. So you shouldn't be there because you're not an audience for that type of menu, right? For that to consume some content. That takes me also to podcasts and these other kinds of structured shows that are online and they're different everywhere, and people are speaking. That's for their target audience, really, because if that is not something that you will enjoy, probably is chances are you will not understand, or you won't have anybody to explain things to you. Most of these podcasts are accompanied by some discussion, which is like a blog type, where people comment and all that happens. That's necessary because that's a way for you to know more about a topic. If you're interested, you want to know more, you can read there and you can post a comment, maybe ask a question. And of course, there's always education going in all that, because there's topics are so diverse, and the same thing happens here, right? If we bring in someone, for example, from another department, they will not enjoy the discussion, right? Or they will not find it useful. All right. So
I'm sorry. I want to say something just before you go on.
go ahead,
Because
please.
I'm thinking about the translation in the same language, you know? For example, I was
Hmm.
thinking of this phrase, "te apetece ir al cine." I have
Hmm.
sometimes uh, had the necessity of translating that to another, to a person that speaks the same language. So, apetece is a word that they use maybe in Spain. "Te apetece ir al cine," that's a Spanish phrase from Spain, no? So, if I'm in a situation in which a person asks, "Les apetece ir al cine?" I always find a person that doesn't know what apetece means. So I've heard this phrase, tradúcemelo. And I have to say, que si quieres ir al cine. Dice que si quieres ir al cine. So it's very interesting because translation, it's not only from one language in terms of English to Spanish or French to English or whatever, but also translation happens in the same language because of semantics differences or things like that. What do you think about it?
This is an interesting perspective. Yeah, we spoke in prior modules of intralingual and interlingual translation, right? Intralingual concerns this other jargon that could be probably specialized, or ways of speaking. Well, ultimately, it depends on the sophistication of the speaker, right? If someone doesn't fit a group, one way for a person to force others to expand their linguistic repertoire is to use sophisticated expressions without much explanation, forcing them to react. If a person tells you something like that, like speak to me in English, or speak to me in Spanish, and like that, uh, that's valid. That's valid from their perspective, but it's also, of course, they do understand what you're telling them. What they probably reject is that you're exposing their limited repertoire, and they may not want to repeat what you're saying, or accept some expressions that could be beyond their their knowledge. Okay, this is something else, right? This is something else, uh, and it's very common. Well, that is one of the reasons why foreign people tend to be rejected when they get to some place. If we were as Panamanians to go anywhere in Central America, or regionally speaking, where Spanish is spoken, of course, they could, may even feel um, um, like, what are you saying? Or they would try to correct you, right? And tell you that you're wrong. This is not the way you say it. But that's the person's perspective. So, yeah, we have to respect people's perspectives. But well, if communication is what really matters, it doesn't matter much the way, right? What matters is the message. In interlingual translation, I think we don't have all that ego involved. It's more about the message essentially. So we wouldn't have to discuss so much, right, about some term or word, because well, everybody has a way of speaking, right, even inside the very same country where you're living in. So true. Very interesting comment, taking us into other realms, right? We're speaking here about other things which are beyond translation, but are also a part of a translation task. Interlingual and intralingual translation, of course. This is very valid. We have interlingual translation, translation inside Spanish. This is so true. This is so true. Very good. Anything else concerning this? If there is any other comment, I'd like us to move forward, because yeah, we are, I think, capable enough to move on and know, right, what to do with omission, right? Omission is not a good thing. We should avoid it, but sometimes it's unavoidable, right? Unavoidable. We cannot prevent some omission to occur. Okay, it's it's something important to bear in mind. Okay, now we're going to be speaking about another subfield of legal translation, which, since it has to do with what we were speaking about yesterday, communication, migration, transactions, business activities, it really matters so much. It's a subfield of legal translations, more like diplomatic, right? Labeled as a genre. So bear with me, because it's a good thing for us to think through what diplomacy and diplomatic translation entails. So in diplomacy, the shift away from using a single language, or French in this case, in recent decades. So what happens is that was a language of diplomacy, right? Before English came to be a global language during the past century, 20th century. It was the century in which English became a global language. But before that, the language widely accepted and used internationally for diplomacy was French. So it was necessary to speak French as a second language around 50 years ago, or maybe even before. And as you know, it's because of historic reasons, right? When we spoke yesterday about the Napoleonic Code and the Code Law, since all of that prevailed across Europe and even Latin America, that also influenced and carried over its influence into diplomacy and the relations, among countries. So this is why French became so important. Now, of course, as its influence declined and English became a global language and more important than other languages, especially this process, accelerated, as you all know, because of internet, which is was originally mostly in English. Now we have a different status, but it's always important to keep in mind the phenomenon that occurred with French. So when French was the language of diplomacy, it was the authoritative medium for international treaties, agreements, and contracts, to the point that that many people compared French with their own L1s, and they said things, kind of outlandish. Like, for example, it is impossible to lie in French because French is very direct, or at least more direct than their original first or mother languages. Of course, we know this is not true, but this is part of the prejudice that occurs, linguistic prejudice, right? Diplomats who were not French fluent, they were not very reliable. and you were not a diplomat unless you spoke French. That was the case. So the use of various languages in diplomacy for political and nationalistic reasons has led to the problem of deciding which text is in which language is the authoritative one. So we all know that whenever a negotiation occurs, there's going to be this imbalance of power. Political influence plays a major role, and generally, for example, in our day, any memorandum of understanding or terms or whatever, the version in English is going to be the authoritative one, whereas the other one becomes secondary. That is our status. Back then, it was the French document, the original, that was the authoritative, and the other one would be secondary product. This creates a problem, and of course, we're in the process of decolonization because of this, because it's even mental, as we're learning, right? You cannot think that the European languages have to be superior to the other ones. But the world works on power and runs on power, and power is held by those who have the means to acquire that power. And one of those is education and language and even religion is used in that regard. Okay, so there is a lot of situation, here concerning ambiguity. Okay, uh, in which I think the United Nations attempted for some time to try to, keep it in balance, keep a balance between, between nations, and of course that balance was political, but of course they were, trying to force everybody to value everybody's language, right? So that peace could be preserved. So it's important here to bring in a case, for example, which, for example, we had offices devoted completely to communicating, in with other cultures and other languages. One of those is the United States Foreign Service, that, as you know, English has become a global language, and it's relevant to speak about the English case because this is what we're living in, the period we're living in, and their function is performed by exiles in many cases, people who um, do not live in the country anymore, and they're in the foreign service. They, of course, are professionals devoted to this. Not all the times they have the best relations with their country of origin because they may be removed. So they know that they have to fulfill a duty, a national duty, but they are also under the pressure of being removed or even being accused of selling out their country. So it's not a comfortable situation for this diplomatic personnel who are stationed, especially in troublesome spots, such as in this example. If you read here, back in the 70s, when Kissinger and Nixon traveled to China, much of the translation and in preparation for the visit was done by Chinese from Taiwan. Okay. And this is something important to bring up because, as you know, Taiwan and China, they have this highly difficult situation for political and economic reasons. And this is still a potential war that may erupt at any moment. And the situation is, as you can, probably foresee here, is that, of course, a lot of it was against the People's Republic of China, which was labeled the Communist China, and they were the democratic China, Taiwan, the democratic China. So they don't want to speak about it that way. And the narrative that China is using is that they are one country policy, one country, everything. But that's not true. That's not true. That's an independent China. That's a different, separate China. And they have their own vision and they have their own agenda, right? All this is part of diplomacy. Um, of course, since this is so troublesome, there will be mistakes along the process. So many leaders tend to blame the translators and interpreters. Okay, in prior modules, we spoke about malinchismo that happened in Mexico, right? When Malinche influenced Cortez's policy towards the Aztecs over there in that part of the world during the conquest. And translators, as we rightly said before, they were labeled as probably someone who would sell you out, right? And write or get you into a deal that you don't fully understand. So sometimes there is a lot of mistrust in the work of a translator. Probably here in Panama, that's one of the reasons why we don't have a translation office anywhere. You don't have that. That should be a part of structure across the different ministries and the government, since they have so much to say and so much to do with foreign governments. Not even Ministerio de Seguridad has a translation office as such. Not even Universidad de Panamá, Universidad Tecnológica, not UDELAS, UNACHI. None of our public universities hold a translation office. And I think a lot of it is distrust. They just mistrust, sorry. They don't trust the work that a translator or interpreter could do. And they want to control everything from the head. So since everything is so centralized, I think it must be a requirement for anybody to hold a minister or hold a high position to at least speak English. Okay, that should be required, but we don't speak about any of those things. So they don't want things to be translated for the public, but they cannot understand things either. But they want to lead you anyway, and they don't know. Okay, this is a problem. This is a problem. So if you ask me, I'm against any authority who doesn't speak at least English and Spanish. That's the way I see it. That's the way I see it. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's my position. And of course, this is all part of diplomacy also, because we have a foreign relations ministry and we have a school of public administration that has a department that is involved in diplomacy and all of this, and they don't speak English either. So we know what we need, but we don't want to take the medicine. So we know we have a disease, but we don't want the medicine either, right? So this is a serious problem. So here in my story is that this fiery leaders such as Gaddafi, late Gaddafi, murdered in Libya several years ago, that he was controlled through his interpreters and translators. They offered lots of alternative and much more acceptable renderings for his words. So you read here that he was speaking about abolishing completely the non-aligned movement. Right? That's Movimiento de los Países No Alineados. That's an important organization that eventually evolved into others. Okay, that exists at present. And the transcript that this is in history. He said surpass, and they use surpass in order to express what he meant. But what he meant was really to abolish. To abolish is to disappear, right? And there are many other cases, right? Here I decided to bring in a couple. Probably those may not be as relevant because this is something in the past. But the reason why they're here is because in the sources they appear as historic, bona fide, real instances of interpretation and translation gaffes or mistakes made uh, during the purpose. During the presentations for the purpose of sometimes making something better understood and sometimes confusing things. So we don't know exactly what is meant ultimately, but there are things that we need to pay special attention to. Take a look. Nikita Khrushchev in the 50s, in the years 56 of last century said, "We will bury you to the Americans," right? And the better interpretation, this is in history, in historic records, was that he said that the Russians would outlast the Americans, right? And or what he meant is that the Russians are going to be present at the funeral of capitalism or American capitalism. So some people understood that as a military threat for a nuclear war. So it's very serious when you listen to something like this. Take a look here, for example, Carter in Poland in 77. Okay, um, he delivered a speech, and what was interpreted in Poland was that he left the United States this morning, and there was an uproar, right, because of this. Okay, and he probably meant something like, "I desire to polish people." That was what was interpreted, and that he didn't mean that. What he meant is that he wanted to learn about the culture and the people. And of course, this is embarrassing, especially coming from an important office such as the U.S. Department of Foreign Relations and Foreign Affairs. This is embarrassing because this is an important office of an important government, and well, they don't forgive and they don't forget. They keep that. I just want to bring in Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Now that the United States is having this military conflict with Iran over the Straits, we have that in Persian he said Israel must be wiped off the map. Probably that has to do with Netanyahu's stance at present of attacking Iran because he sees it as a threat. Uh, but the reality is that probably he meant that uh, Jerusalem must vanish from the page of time. Uh, so he was suggesting probably something else, but it was taken as a military threat. Or maybe it was directly a threat, and then tension rose just because of those words used, right? So very serious. Very good. Diplomatic translation is sophisticated. It is indeed. And there'll be another seminar, I should say, just like I was saying yesterday, that some topics such as legal translation deserve 40 hours, maybe more. Same here. Diplomatic translation is very serious, and this is part of history more than legal translation, because many of the things happening in the world today began with a mistranslation or a misinterpretation. Uh, we have to distinguish here verified mistranslation, disputed mistranslation, and cultural misunderstandings, right? So mistranslations as such could be verified that there was some limitation because of the difficulty of the task presented to the interpreters or interpreter team that was in charge. So they were likely to make mistakes. So if you are translating or interpreting from a very culturally distant language, such as Chinese and Mandarin or or Arabic, of course, this is very challenging you're likely to make mistakes. There's no escaping from mistakes, just like you can escape omission, right? We were saying that before. There are also disputed mistranslation that there are different versions of the same based on what the audience listened and who were the scholars who were advising those interpreters if they were ever present, right? At the point now, of course, anybody in the world, anywhere, could have access to anything live, but sometimes it's not possible, right? So there could be some sayings that are in dispute. Some others could be simply misunderstandings because of culture. In this module and this seminar, we're speaking about cultural limitations, right? In translation, English Spanish translation, those take the form of proverbs, idioms, and sayings, right? All of that is cultural information that is very difficult to process. That is why we're taking the pauses, right? To go ahead and explain those. Okay, very good. So I'm gonna take right now a break if that is okay. But when we come back, I would like you to please rephrase these three expressions. These are part of history. We will bury you. We're ignoring your proposal, and this regime must disappear. Right? Three, and um, well, let's try to express this in Spanish the best we can so as to translate this message to non-English speaking populations. So how would you go ahead and do so? I'm going to leave this right here, and I would suggest us to take a brief break, right? So I just need confirmation.
Well, we have said before, it is on you. You decide. If it's from 10 to 15 minutes, so you decide how long it is going to be.
Sure. If it is 10:07, when are we coming back? In 15 minutes?
Yes.
So that'll be what? 7:22.
Yes. 7 to
Wonderful. Very good. So
yeah.
7:22 it is.
10
We'll be
22.
right back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, it's time to come back from our break. So, Professor Rafael, we are all yours. It seems that we need to wait a little bit for Professor Rafael.
So, here we are back. It's already 10:24 according to my cell phone. I guess we'll resume right now. So, in the meantime, we requested you to try to provide some kind of, and that'll be interlingual translation because you'll be translating, well, intralingual because you'll be translating in English. And this is a subject matter that Professor Lucy Chow brought in intralingual translation. This is also a kind of translation. It's part of the translation phenomenon. It is indeed a part of it. That we sometimes need to interpret things not into a foreign language or second language, but more to make the message understood and clear. So whoever feels like participating right now and go ahead and provide some kind of interpretation for this, diplomatically speaking, right? Potentially dangerous remarks. How would you put this in other words? That's what I'm asking for, really. How would you say the same in other words? First, we will bury you. We're ignoring your proposal. This regime must disappear. How will you put that in other words?
Okay, so number one would definitely be we'll kill you, we'll finish you.
Well, I should tell you that that's not the diplomatic translation
Oh, no.
expected from you. You should try to make this more friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was a diplomatically version.
Yeah. For that one, I think something like our system will endure beyond yours or something like that, something very diplomatic, because when it is political matters, we have to be very careful. Something like history will show that our system will prevail or something like that will be better.
Very good, exactly. How about the second one? We're ignoring your proposal.
Mm.
I would say that for this second time, we could say
We are considering other aspects.
Okay,
But
that could
I'm
be.
not saying anything
Why not?
there.
Why not? Sure. Why not? And this
Yeah.
regime must disappear. Imagine that you are trying to rephrase this from Marco Rubio. How will you put this in a different tone?
It is time to consider other ways of governing.
I know. Well, Actually, I have what history states was uh, translated, and this is also translation. Okay, I'd like to emphasize this very much because some people don't accept or don't acknowledge that intralingual translation is a way of translating things as well. And if you go to any book on translation, you will discover that there is intersemiotic, intralingual, and interlingual. Okay, interlingual is what we're doing whenever we do English Spanish or Spanish English, but there is also intralingual. And here we have some cases, right? As you see here, this is also valid. It's rephrasing and paraphrasing. Yesterday, when we were talking about Dryden, we learned that a, a concept such as paraphrasing comes from translation. Okay, that's where it comes from, really, where things are rephrased in a way as to communicate similar ideas using different words. So putting things in other words is paraphrasing or rephrasing. That is called in Spanish paraphrasis. All right, paraphrasis, and it's a linguistic phenomenon, and it goes along the ways of, in most cases, of intralingual. Right. Okay. Do you have any comments concerning this and diplomatic translation?
I think
Is there any comment?
in a diplomatic translation, I was trying to do something like that. No, with the examples, it's that you you have to suggest things, not directly saying things, but to suggest. Like when I was trying to say that it is time to consider, then you're saying that there's something that should be done. It is time to consider doing this or doing that. You're not literally saying that the people should do that, but you're saying it. Like it is time to consider. Consider is a word that they use a lot in a diplomatic environment, no? So you invite people to think differently or to do something by saying, consider doing this. So it is also something that they learn in the universities, how to interpret those words, and that's why we are so astonished with some political authorities like Trump or the president of El Salvador or the president of Argentina, because they do not respond to diplomatic protocols. They act as if they were children. So we are so concerned about this. It's because the world is used to diplomacy. Even if we in our houses we think that they are a little bit they have a little bit of a hypocrisy. We don't mind hypocrisy if, since we conserve or we still have good manners, and we expect from politicians to have extremely good manners. Yeah, but in terms of translating, I would always use words like that: consider, we, it is time to change. Yeah, that's what I think about this translation. And if I have to do something like this in a diplomatic um, area, I would stick to the idea of being polite. Thank you.
I definitely agree with you very much. This right wing, recent ascent of regimes and governments across our region in Latin America and in other parts of the world, it's characterized, by this behavior of not being very diplomatic and They think the way to communicate to the people is disrespecting them. Even the current Panamanian president is part of that package because you know what he has said. The recordings are out there. It's not anything that we're making up. This is all available, and this fulfillment of a role by understanding that they have a position that they hold, a some chair that requires a position that requires an identity that they need to acquire, they represent a status quo, and all of this. They kind of they tend to prefer to ignore. They tend to prefer to ignore that part of their role. So manners play an important role here. And of course, diplomacy is about telling the message. But of course, you have to be truthful. But how you say that message matters as much as what you say, right? It's both things, right? What you say and how you say things. Okay, because that's the way it is. It's when they become authorities in a country, they acquire a pact. It's like they're establishing a pact with the people. So they need to do things right, be truthful, right, as much as possible, and also behave in a way that reflects their standing. And I think we're not selecting the best candidates for president, right? Same as here, we will not tell the people that someone said we will bury you. Of course, there must be some more maybe friendlier or lighter way to express that. It's very same thought. Here you have a couple of those. So we need to exercise a little bit more of diplomacy also. That's a part of it. And well, at least we can acknowledge these topics. Okay, we have some discussion questions here that I thought we could invest some time discussing, taking a look. But honestly, I'm just going to comment briefly here. We're not going to stop at this point. So, so when, as a translator, should you start interpreting? Well, you have to start interpreting what you consider people's decency, right? You have to be right, truthful, honest. You have to exercise some values and live up to the values of your office, right? And also project, accordingly. People have expectations, so you cannot tell them. You should not never use. We should never use or include anything that is rude, coarse language, vulgar, obscene. All that must be avoided at all costs, right? So that is the point at which someone should begin interpreting. Okay, that should be the role of PR office or a PR official. Anybody in that role must try to sincere someone who is expressing himself or herself outside of the lines, right, of what is decent, what should be decency. So should diplomatic translators prioritize literal fidelity or pragmatic intent? If you ask me, we have to try to attempt to be literal because that is being honest. But the pragmatic intent is as important. So I would say 50-50. You try to be honest and literal, but you should also be pragmatic. You have to explain things in a way that is decent, that respects the audience and respects the intelligence of an audience. Number two, can a technical correct translation still be diplomatically misleading? If you ask me, that could be the case. However, as long as the translation is technically correct. Okay, by technically correct, we mean precise or accurate to the best of your understanding or to the best of your ability, I think that's at least it sets the bar where it's supposed, you are at the right level. Okay, that's where you need to go. So how should translators handle idioms that have no equivalent in the target language? This is one of the questions that I posted in Classroom for you. Okay, so pay attention to this. I think if you ask me, what I could recommend is that a person needs to explain that and try to make things very, very clear as to avoid misunderstandings. If something is very idiomatic, some expression is very idiomatic, or could be misinterpreted because of its nature, that deserves clarification. So clarifying is part of the role of the translator, especially in diplomatic matters, because as we said, there is a category of cultural misunderstandings. And as we said, I've been talking here ever since we began. I'm not talking about now at present in August, but before in prior modules, a lot of the proverbs, a lot of the idiomatic expressions, a lot of the sayings, all of that, even false cognates deserve attention because you may have this partial false cognates, right, or full false cognates. You need to clarify all that information. Is very important. What ethical responsibilities do interpreters have when a literal translation could escalate tensions? Well, literature informs us that you have to avoid conflict at all costs, right? Uh, uh, what is more costly than anything is a war or military conflict or some kind of political or economic situation derived from a misunderstanding that could have been prevented. So diplomatic translation is there along with the diplomats to prevent that to escalate into more costly matters, right? Okay, now we're gonna move on into cognates. All right, you're gonna I'm gonna apologize to you right now, but right now at present this is presenter speaking time because I really need to cover up for some points that are coming ahead. And we have a little bit of a heavy, hefty load to lift coming up. So I'm gonna be rushing things a bit here, a bit more than before. So cognates, all right, cognates deserve attention. I just talked about them and how they relate to translation activity. Here, in the case of diplomatic translation, we know that cognates could lead into confusion, may cause problems of different kinds. Take a look at, for example, honesto, right? We have, it's a false cognate for honest, okay? Okay. It's instead, what it really means is honrado, right? And that's different from honest. Now, if you cannot tell the difference between being honest and honrado, honrado is more encompassing, right? It lives up to some values, right? And honest is just telling the truth. It's just one thing, one action. Over there, when you say honrado, that's honorable. So that is why you see that Asamblea de Diputados, they keep on calling themselves el honorable, la honorable. Why do they call themselves like that? Because it's important for them to project that image, even though they don't live to the expectations, and everybody knows this, right? But they have adopted such a name as a way to wash their face. That's, you know this, okay? So honesto is more decent, decorous, and modest. Okay, it's more encompassing, right? So it reflects the values, the human values. We have a partial false cognate for humano, for human in the sense of a human being. It's more like humane in the sense of compassionate. So we need a much more a wider explanation of the term. Okay. I don't know if this is clear, but it's worth taking notes on this and going after the term out there on your own to confirm or double check on it. Ignorar is a false cognate to be unaware, right? Ignoró lo que pasó con Juan. That's like don't know, or I'm not aware. That's different. That's different. Awareness is one thing. So, and ignoring something, that's something else. So it's not the same of to deliberately not pay attention to, instead of use no prestar atención, no hacer caso. Okay, so those are different things, right? So ignorar is to be unaware, no prestar atención, no hacer caso, that's more appropriate. Okay. More appropriate if you're translating, of course, into Spanish. We have ilustrado, so partial false cognate, for to have illustrations in the sense of pictures. So learned or enlightened, okay? Those are possible entries for this very same word. And el profesor es un hombre ilustrado, so that'll be enlightened, someone learning, illustrated, educated, whatever. So imponerse is a partial false cognate, to assert on ourselves, to be authoritative, right? It's not the same as imponerse. It's not the same as bother or cause a problem. Instead, is molestar. Okay, that's imponerse is more like molestar would be a better phrasing for the word in Spanish, right? Impresionante, it's a partial false cognate. Okay. Usually stronger than the English impressive, right? In Spanish, the tone, is grandiose, right? So generally means shocking, startling, alarming. Okay, that's possible replacements or equivalents for impresionante. Inédito is a partial false cognate, as in equals unpublished, right? Artículo inédito, right? Something that's never been, a manuscript that has never been presented, right? Manuscrito inédito, that will become potentially a published article. That's one of the requirements most of the journals have established, right? We have unheard of, inédito, novel, innovative, unprecedented. Impresionante over there, it's repeated, so I'm sorry about that. Inquietud. We're moving on to inquietud. We have uneasiness, right? It's a partial false cognate that equals uneasiness. Also, intellectual curiosity or doubt. Okay, that's curiosity, an interest to learn about something. Integral is a partial false cognate that equals, or it's equivalent to integral, and that's pretty much in mathematics. Also comprehensive, right? El concepto de la defensa integral, just to give an example. Intervenir, it's a partial false cognate that equals interfere, also to operate surgically, okay? So it could also be technical in health. Concerning proverbs and idioms, we have quite a few of those, and they keep on appearing, right? You could run into one of these resources or lists or dictionaries. So we have estar de moda, to be fashionable. Estar en el pellejo de otro, estar en los zapatos de otros, to be in someone else's shoes. So that's a good equivalent, right, to bear in mind. Estar en las nubes, to be in the clouds or daydreaming. Okay, it's like lost, right? Estar en vigor, to be in effect, as in a treaty, to be in effect, something is in effect. Okay, estar en vísperas de, on the eve of. Estar muy metido en, to be deeply involved in. Estar para, to be about. Estar quebrado, to be broke or bankrupt. We have a fiesta quinceañera, coming out party for a young woman age 15, right? It's a coming out party. And formar parte de, to be a part of, right? So we have equivalents for so many things that we could think of. And this is another layer, meaning that we need to learn. I don't dare to give you exercises or request examples from this, because this is one of those areas that some people say it's impossible to learn this, that you cannot learn this field on proverbs and idioms. Is some people say you just don't learn that. You use it and you learn it as you use it, right? So we will not have any exercises concerning that. Okay, I'm moving on now into a bit of history of translation also as part of our content for the seminar and certificate program. This is a major topic because a lot of what we have inherited comes from this period and before. Before we spoke about Romanticism also and John Dryden's contribution along with other writers of the day. Now we will go over what Romanticism offered concerning literary translation. Now, I'd like to set here apart two major branches of translation because it's important for us in a seminar like this to refer to technical and non-technical. Okay, technical translation would be under the guise of probably a legal, diplomatic, I don't know, scientific, mostly. Those would be technical translation as a genre or as a group or as a family of translation types. The other type, of course, is literary art, art-related, freer translation that does not need, all that precision, but more of the aesthetics. Now, literary translation is a little bit more of aesthetics than precision because the implications are not as serious as in, for example, literal translation and other genres, right? So, bear with me because I'm going to try to locate what our discussion is coming on Romanticism in Latin America. So the spirit of the 19th century Romanticism, especially in Latin America, rejected the cold and rigid laws of neoclassicism and freed the human spirit so as to it could roar to greater heights of emotion and creativity, right? Romanticism treated translators in two contradictory manners, right? And you should foresee very clearly why. One has to do with simplicity translation as a way of permitting access to unbridled spirits and emotions in other language or languages. The translator's job was not to create, but to allow the romantic spirit to flow faithfully from one language to the other. So um, there is this contradiction, right? That you need to communicate the same emotion as long as it is possible in another language, right? You're not to translate accurately, but to communicate the emotion essentially. The other romantic treatment of translators was to treat them as fellow romantics and allow them the freedom to feel and create as equals in the process. So, in a way, given that these linguistic boundaries, they're more like they become barriers. Really, they become barriers. It was almost impossible, right? That a translator could be not only would sacrifice being faithful for being emotional, right? So it's a real problem. Ideally, this treatment of the translator as a creative genius in touch with the feelings of the writer would result in an enriching of language and literature of the target language. So more art was created than anything. And the message could be sacrificed to some extent. As might be expected, the Romantics were much concerned with the translation of poetry, and a great deal of attention paid to it, and the period dealt with the issue of whether or not poetry could be adequately translation or at all. Some people say it's impossible to translate poetry. Now we bring in Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was against or adamant that translation could not do poetry justice unless one could go back to the original seat of thought of the poet's mind. It would be so important to be in the shoes, right, and in the mind of the poet, the original writer, as a way to really fully communicate all of that information. if it were as wise to cast a violet into a crucible, right? You take a look, that you might discover the formal principle of its color and odor, as to seek to transfuse from one language to another the creations of a poet. A plant must spring again from its seed, or it will bear no flower. This is the burden of the curse of Babel. So, when they say Babel, as you know, it's the biblical tower by Babel, in the book of Genesis, that they're referring to, which is this intermingle of cultures and languages that exists in the world, or has existed, that limits communication across cultures and becomes barriers. So you have to pretty much go to the original in order to communicate emotion and art and beauty. It's not the same as messages and being literal and word for word or thought for thought. It's that doesn't apply really as it seems. So this was another drastic vision of translation. The best poetry translators will carry out the very best poetry translations ever created were from this period by poets themselves also. So we have an example here from the sources I've been reading. We see here Matthew Arnold argued that the purpose of translation, especially poetry, should be to achieve the same effect on a reader that the original would have on those who would read the language of the writer. So it's a very ambitious goal to be as good as the original writer. All right. However, also accuracy must be sacrificed for aesthetic and emotional effect. So one of those major poet writers and poet translators was Edward Fitzgerald, whose translation of the Persian of Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam carries deep impact in English. So that's part of the literature, bringing in, consuming all of these international literary texts. So yeah, it was a big period. Okay, the 19th century, essentially, that would require emotion, nature, individualism, imagination, national identity, and the literature. But above all, it's communicating the beauty of a text, a piece of poetry, or some story or a novel, even sacrificing content. I mean, accuracy, precision, and more into the spirit. So the Romantic period, late 18th century, mid 19th, transformed the theory and practice of translation, right? And it's compared here to the Enlightenment, right? Which is another important moment in history, and the early modern history that valued reason, clarity, and imitation of classical models. So Romanticism emphasized individual creativity, emotion, imagination, national identity, and the uniqueness of each language and culture. So probably one of the reasons why all of these advanced degrees, like PhDs in literature, are scarce, really, is because how could you, think in terms of early modern criteria at a time such as the present, right? In the present, we're living through under some other paradigm. Paradigm is precision, technology oriented, and this is probably not very functional or not seen as very professional. So literary translation from this period, Romantic period, 19th century, 18th century, it followed these key characteristics that I'm just going to highlight the titles. The translator as a creative artist, okay? Focus on the spirit of the text. Cultural enrichment. freedom in translation, and respect for foreign cultures. So that was many of them were inherited also, but they do not prevail, or they're not very popular at present, right? Many terms were either foreignized or domesticated. This is another feature, because since it was freer and more creativity went in the translation process, it was very difficult to deal with terminology. The terminology one way or the other, right? Depending on the needs of communicating the information. There are major figures from the time. I'm just going to briefly here mention. One of them is Friedrich Schleiermacher and August Wilhelm Schlegel, both major names. One of them for even translating Shakespeare, right? And as you know, this is one of the major pieces of literature ever produced, right, by William Shakespeare. And well, it was they attempted to replicate it, right? And they're still attempting to replicate it either through different media, right? Okay, needless to say, its relevance, right? In one sentence at the bottom, we read here that romantic translation emphasized capturing the spirit, emotion, and artistic beauty of a work through creative translation with respecting the uniqueness of the original language and culture. Okay, so this is it. All right. Now I'm forced to transition into something more technical, something that approaches more our everyday translation challenges. This is lexical problems and semantic mapping. This is something we mentioned in prior modules, but we're going to briefly go over this very same content for the sake of moving on, with our agenda and plan. So what is semantic mapping? Well, that's doing our best to respect meaning. That's what it is. And how do we respect meaning? We respect meaning by breaking down things in ways that are understandable for the general population. Since everything a translator translates goes through his or her vision of reality, there is an element of bias, right? It's bias to some extent. And this is not a vice. Bias is part of the human phenomenon of looking at things through your eyes. So in order to be precise and correct, it's important to pay attention to meaning, right? And we're going to mention now something that we've heard everywhere in private schools, in universities, even in public schools. Everybody speaks about this, right? What is this? It's the bilingual dictionary. Many people advise against using bilingual dictionaries. And the argument against bilingual dictionaries, that's English, Spanish, Spanish, English dictionaries, which have become less common at present, of course, because back in the day, they were like fancy, I don't know, the best resource you could have in your library. The thing is, bilingual dictionaries, they are just lists of equivalencies, okay? And these equivalent terms, one-on-one, they, as you all know, support the word-for-word mindset on translation, which is wrong because we have to go meaning, from meaning to meaning. That's probably phrase to phrase, sentence to sentence, clause to clause, chunk through chunk of language, not word for word. Word for word, that's what we know as grammar translation, right? So escaping that is very necessary. So the problem with the bilingual dictionary is the biggest complaint or regret about this kind of resource is that it caused everybody to feel that you can find one word for one word that you have in English, then you have just one word. You don't think of other ranges of meaning and the overlapping meanings with other categories or other words. And some phenomenon like polysemy, that's a word having different meanings, was largely ignored. And they just told you things like you can use get in many phrases. If, for example, using a word like get, if you had to translate get into Spanish, that would just give you a note over there like you can use get in many expressions. And that's not an answer, really. That doesn't help very much. So to compensate for this deficiency, it is possible to consult single language dictionaries after the bilingual ones to pin down the range of meaning. And a really dedicated translator will consult single language etymology and expanded dictionaries to find a history of word usage and place it in specific contexts. So if a word is unknown, the best way is for you to proceed from the bilingual dictionary or the bilingual resource, such as word reference, for example, which is bilingual. Not that we're saying that we don't need it, we could need it, but that should only be an initial level. Then you move into same language dictionaries or one language dictionary, monolingual. And then from there, you go into specialized resources or dictionaries, or so forth. The problem is that few translators are willing to go through that, right? Bilingual, monolingual, technical, okay? The bane of the translator. This is kind of a curse, like false cognates, once more, right? Once more, false cognates. Words that overlapping meaning with other terms. This is serious. False cognates frequently involve problems with lexical mismatches, right? When you make a mistake and you use an an inappropriate term and you altered meaning, and you don't know why. The reason is ignoring some other semantic, component to the word that you're using. This sometimes develop because of words that evolve differently in the languages, maybe from a single root, right? That's part of etymology. Perhaps because the similarity is it's not only coincidental and there is no linkage at all between the words. In any case, false cognates are a bane of a translator, one of the quickest ways to test the translation competency of an individual, right? So texts loaded with this, they're a trap, right? So it's important to learn more about cognates, right? Very good. So we're moving on. Semantic mapping. Okay, so this is where semantic mapping comes to help us or assist us. In order to avoid falling into the one word, one meaning, or word for word correspondences or equivalences, we could use this head device that comes from, it's a tool in linguistic theory. Okay? As the name suggests, it means drawing a diagram of the range of meaning of one or more words in ways that will help us avoid traps of the kinds mentioned. Right, word for word semantic mapping, that is possible, right? However, we need to be aware that there could be replacements for a word. We know over here, for example, on your left in the boxes, that Evita falls into under the categories of beagle, dog, and canine, right? Some of those are more technical than the other, right? Canine probably being the more technical one, and the simpler form Evita is just the name of the pet. However, we also have on the right, now we're getting the Spanish element involved, and problems begin to appear when we cannot find common replacements or equivalences for the different categories on which a term may fall. Sometimes we may have partial correspondences or limited or lack of equivalence altogether. This is a case that we brought in earlier, case of a word such as novia, that falls into three categories in English, right? We have the girlfriend, fiance, bride categories that they all stand for novia in Spanish, right? It's one category. If we have a situation like this, then we need to, be very careful because we're dealing with something foreign, completely foreign. Over here on the right, you have a case of a term such as nail, and this is polysemy. This is an instance of polysemy. Um, um, you have a word that has different meanings. Could mean a part of a body, of the human body, and even a piece of metal used for, joining sections of some kind of construction. So here there must be care to be exercised when using a term, and in the absence of another term that is more precise, then note should be taken, right, about what to do. And this is a way to discover troublesome words. Now, there is an important element that we brought in before that we were discussing here, and that is consistency in translation. So if you don't do the semantic mapping of a term, then you cannot be consistent throughout your translation or the different versions of the same translation or referring to the same topic. So it's important to keep this in mind. Um, Here is also necessary to establish that there are levels, right? Levels. In the case of novia, we cannot say that girlfriend, fiance, and bride belong to different registers. They belong more to different status of the same condition. So notes should be taken. Same as in the case of nail, we cannot say that uña or clavo belong to different registers of the same thing. They're not even the same. They're completely separate. And notes should be taken in order to avoid ambiguity. Also, semantic mapping could go around concepts. Joining may take different forms. Here you have very clear examples that I'm providing. And it's necessary, for the sake of consistency, exactly, to go ahead and establish which one is preferred according to the context of what you're translating or the audience, the readership of the material. Um, in a nutshell, at the bottom, I'd like to read this through this with you. So, semantic mapping helps us understand relationship between words with one language or across language. Such mapping can be used as a teaching device or as a reminder of the pitfalls of using the wrong part of world's range when translating. So, some people may think of this as unnecessary additional work, but believe it or not, translation literature has become enriched through the exercise or the experience and the mistakes of the translators. So anything that you could design that to help other translators avoid making mistakes, this is going to be very useful. And we need these books, you see. You will not find that many books because people feel that not many people, not everybody's going to read this or would be interested in this. And everything is valid, I would say. I should say this. Okay, we need to write more, and the writing could come from this curiosities about language that deserve attention, because in a language classroom, teachers ignore a lot of this or overlook this, and students need to save themselves by clarifying things on their own. And it's a big disservice to education not to write on something that is a constant cause of problems. Okay, something that we keep on tripping over. We need to write about how to either bypass it, waive it, work our way around it. Some solution is necessary and that will only come from reflection. Okay, very good. Okay, being now 11:12, I'm going to start discussing this topic, which is also part of the test, which is in classroom for us to submit. All right, so this is another issue that deserves attention. Translation problems on techniques, of passive voice trap. Why do we say trap? Because well, we may think we're free to use passive voice, you know, whichever way we feel like or whenever it's necessary. And that's not always the case. There are certain limitations to the use of passive voice, and not because of aesthetics, but it's more so for practical reasons related to cognition. So we read here that the passive voice has some problems, right? Because of its Latin roots, the verb structure of Spanish is different from English, right? We learned this from comparative linguistics. Student of intermediate and advanced Spanish learns many of these differences, and even elementary students have to struggle with basic complications such as ser and estar. Coming from Spanish, we don't think this is a problem, but this is a problem for people studying Spanish as a second language. They run into a big problem trying to decide which one is the right one, when to say estar, when to say ser. Okay, it's trouble. So some of the other problems which the advanced students of Spanish should be familiar with include, we see here one simple past tense, right? In Spanish, two preterite and imperfect subjunctives, right? To know and do make in Spanish, saber, conocer, hacer. These are troublesome verbs, and their use will be confusing for a long time until they achieve some mastery of Spanish grammar, which I think is probably not that hard compared to other languages, but it takes a while to figure out all of that. Many verbs which are not reflexive in English are reflective in Spanish. We'll say, example, wash, fall down, get up, shave, etc. Right? They're reflexive in Spanish, right? Lavarse, caerse, levantarse, afeitarse, right? So the English modal auxiliaries will, shall, would, shall, might, and this big family may complicate matters for sure. So in this section, we will discuss three verb forms which cause the Spanish-English translator problems because while their use is not correct, their appearance seem odd or foreign if used more than occasionally. This is the first criteria for us to bear in mind, please. We may assume that their use is not correct or it is odd or foreign if used too much, right? The first and most common problem is the passive voice, right? It is frequent in English. Please take note of this. It's frequent in English, but unused or relatively unused in Spanish, okay? That's what uh, comparative linguistics has discovered. It is common in English, not very much or not very popular in Spanish, okay? As a result, a translator should question any use of the passive voice in Spanish to see if it is required or justified, and then perhaps test the result with a native speaker, see if the use of passive voice sounds excessive. So be warned that without doing all of these steps, you need to double check every time you're going to be using passive voice in Spanish because it's not part of our syntax or L1 syntax. The passive is legitimately used in Spanish when the agent of verb's action is specified or very strongly implied. Let's look at the examples in blue here, light blue. The car was stolen by Juan. El auto fue robado por Juan. The car was stolen today. Then by the thief is omitted or tacit. El auto fue robado hoy por el ladrón. That's omitted also. In other cases where the agent of verb's action is not expressed or stressed, Spanish more naturally would use a direct active voice or the construction word with a reflexive. So the se, which is most of the reflexive, is often preferred, okay? Often preferred, rather than this structured piece by piece type of active passive voice transformations. So remember, reflexive forms are preferred, or simply active voice, but not so much passive. So let's see. The house was painted last year, very common and okay in English. Pintaron la casa el año pasado, okay? Se pintó la casa el año pasado, okay? The reflexive construction is especially prevalent, okay? So, se pintó la casa el año pasado, that should be the preferred one. Eating is not permitted in the library. Very good, okay, in English, no problem. But poor, no está permitido comer en la biblioteca. That's not natural. Better, no se permite comer en la biblioteca. Now, the best option is se prohíbe comer en la biblioteca. So you see here that we don't have right or wrong. We have preferred or unpreferred. The message is there, but the quality of the translation is not the same. The more refined and the better quality one is the one that uses or follows more the syntactic conventions, right? We need to be aware of this. So let me go back to this. What did we learn here? What we learned is that we have preferred, listen to the word, preferred forms, right? In the use of active voice or passive voice, for Spanish, it's better to use either reflexive forms or active voice. And if you use a reflexive with a se, all right, se pintó la casa or se prohíbe, that's better. That's better. Not that it is good. The message is across, it's okay, but one has more quality than the other. That's what it means. That's a criteria important to bear in mind. The second verb problem is the English present participle. Gerunds, as you know, look very much like participles and verbs. They're verbals, right? You have participles, you have gerunds, and you have all of these forms that they're very similar. In English, the ing form pretty much stands for ando, or kind of equals it, but not all the time. As with the passive, English tends to use it more often because they have a whole family. Among the parts of speech, you know, that gerunds, present participles, and ing ending verbs, which are continuous. They're a huge group, and they occur a lot because they're three different categories. However, that's not the case of Spanish, right? Okay. So, and the translator should ask the same question about whether the gerund is permissible or advisable in Spanish. So, English tends to use it more in progressive tenses, above all, more than in Spanish. Spanish avoids it, and when we de-emphasize how long the action will take. So, we have some cases here, for example. We read, what are you eating, right? For Spanish, a mistranslation would be, ¿qué estás comiendo? No. Better to say, que estás, better, que comes, right? Just possible. The message is clear, but it is not good quality, or it's not very good translation. Better translation is que comes. Okay, so avoiding. There must be also avoidance of ings, right? English frequently uses the gerund as an adjective. Spanish cannot. Because why? Because of present participles, decision making, interesting ideas, so forth. Then they become more like a phrase in Spanish. Like, toma de decisiones, idea interesante. So these are more phrase-like type. In the place of a Spanish infinitive, le gusta comer, amar es vivir. That's what we call infinitives in Spanish, which are like very neutral That's essentially the infinitive quality in Spanish is that the expressions are neutral. For English, this is the right way or preferred. He likes eating, loving is living. Okay. Finally, we have also the dramatic present. Okay. When the present tense is used to describe an action in the past to give a more dramatic impact, okay, often used in Spanish, rarely in English. So let me go over it once more. The dramatic present. So this is when you tell a story, right? When you describe an action in the past to give a more dramatic impact. So here we read, San Martín nace en Yapeyú, pero muy joven se traslada a España para iniciarse en la carrera militar. All right. So what tense is being used here? We're using present tense, right, to describe an action. Okay. Right. The present tense is used to describe an action in the past. So we know that that was back at some point in the past, but it's all described in present. It's dramatic present. It's to cause an effect, to bring the information, approach, help the reader, right? Cause an impact in the reader. So the English dramatic present sounds very strange. San Martin is born in Yapeyú, but at an early age he moves to Spanish, blah, blah. A more natural sounding English translation would use the past tense. Okay, San Martin was born Yapeyú at an early age and so forth. Now we know, since we are advanced users of English, that there must be a tense agreement. And essentially, preserving tense agreement is stating things in the proper tense. That's not the case of Spanish. Spanish is a lot more flexible. As we discussed before, English and Spanish differ according to comparative linguistics in these regards. Okay, let me go over very quickly here. So we have three instances in which we really need to be careful concerning the passive voice. We need to understand, first of all, that passive voice is commonly used in English, but not in Spanish. What is preferred in Spanish is the use of much more neutral forms, right? That'll be active voice or using reflexive forms, right? Anything that is reflexive or active voice is preferred over passive voice that's more word for word, right? Very literal translation like that is going to ruin the quality of the translation. Concerning the use of ing endings, ando, we cannot go automatically into mind changing mode. Like everything ing, I'm gonna go ando, and not thinking about it. Understand that progressive forms, ing endings, they're very common in English, but we don't use that in English and in Spanish. I mean, we avoid that. Okay. ing ending forms become more like Spanish, infinitives. We also use more like phrase type of construction in Spanish, and neutral forms like "qué comes" for what are you eating, what are you doing, "qué haces," and so forth. This is a lot better. This contributes to the quality of the translation and makes it better understood. Thinking in terms of the person we're translating for. Okay. The use of the dramatic present for narration, we have to be careful about it. We may tend to feel like we can alter the tense of some story and say past story in present tense. That doesn't work in English. That's a big no. Why? Because it's confusing. You're breaking apart. You're breaking completely tense agreement in a story. Okay, so that's a big no. Okay, very good. So before I proceed into cognates, I'd like to know if you have any questions concerning a passive voice or any comment, of course. Not a question, but maybe a comment.
Well, I think that this passive voice is in Spanish is also used in institutions, like when they say in the bank, like su cuenta ha sido cerrada o su cuenta ha sido pausada or something like that. That the person doesn't want to take responsibility, accountability about the action, no? So they use the passive voice also in Spanish for that.
Yeah. They're trying to hide the agent of the action. Most of those cases, they're not telling you that they did it themselves. It's like they proceeded or the system proceeded as if it were not a managerial decision. They made the decision. They're trying to make this an impersonal thing when they know they make the decision. That's why they use that kind of language. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any comment? Okay, very good. This is a topic that is one of the questions, one of those 6 questions that I posted in classroom. Okay. This PowerPoint is going to go online also on Friday after we end our last session. So you will run into this information again and if you need it. Concerning cognates, all right, we should carry on with this trip through cognates. Intoxicado, take a look at intoxicado. Could we say it stands for intoxicated generally? Yeah, but usually in a medical or physical reaction to poison or bad food, not being drunk. Okay. So instead, if you're referring to being inebriated because of alcohol consumption, better is ebrio or borracho or maybe drogado, right? Introducir is a false cognate for to present or insert an idea or object. Not in the case of to present person to another, we should use instead presentar. Se presentó a José, right? Se presentó a José. Okay, so that's another instance of the same. So I don't know if this serves your comments or if you have anything to say concerning this. Invertir, for example, is a partial false cognate, to turn upside down. Okay. So turn something upside down. But that could also be to invest money or capital. We have jornada. It's a false cognate for journey. Instead, we should use viaje. Okay. Day's work, short seminar or workshop. Okay. We have labor, partial false cognate for, has a broader meaning than English labor, which usually means manual, physical, or factory work. The Spanish labor, in South America, laburo, right? They use that. They can also mean mental or intellectual work. Laburo is trabajo, right? Empleo. So in the terminology of economics and government, English labor is translated as trabajo, Ministerio de Trabajo. So we keep on running on all of these terms that overlap, right? They tend to generally overlap into other categories, and that's why there is always this adjustment that should be performed as you translate. So we have a couple here like lectura, that's a false cognate for reading, different from lecture. Lecture is a conferencia, ponencia. I think this is being repeated. I presented some of these before, but it's worth including them here, given that this is the last module of our certificate program. And for seminar attendees, this is new information. So it's a good thing to bring this in. So you say local is a partial false cognate. Local in the sense of being close by. Also, it could be the store premise or venue, right? Local. El local 12 del edificio, right? That'll be the venue. Localizar, partial false cognate, so make local, right? Not like locate or find. Instead, situar, ubicar, right? That'll be different. In translation, localizar is also to make translation adjusted to cultural context. That's another possible use of the word, right? Concerning proverbs and idioms, of course, we need to carry on with them and look at some of them. Uh, I'm including here in this PowerPoint, fuera de sí of out of sorts or unconscious, right? Fuera de sí, out of sorts. There could be other, of course, possible meanings to this, but they don't have a word for word correspondence. Be more like a proverb. Como un roble, as strong as an
Professor, we
ox.
can add arena,
Oh yeah,
arena, right?
arena.
Yeah, arena, we
Okay,
used to say arena is doesn't have the same proportional meaning in the two languages, right? Arena
right,
and arena has
right.
different meanings, right? And that is a
Yeah,
false cognate.
absolutely.
We used to say false friends.
Exactly. Arena in the sense of a coliseum.
Yeah,
That'll be
Coliseum,
something
right?
else.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
They
Thank
have the
you.
same meaning, they have the same the writings, and then they look like in writing, very similar. Pronunciation maybe, yes, but they have different meanings.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you rightly said it. And this is something that we cannot escape. Eh, the key takeaway from this seminar is that this is a field, more, as I said yesterday, a minefield that we need to help our students and help ourselves learn how to navigate because people don't some That's the question they ask you. If you go to the language center at the Faculty of Humanities, that's the number one question everybody is going to listen in any classroom, in any class over there, in el Centro de Lenguas. That's what people are going to say. What's the meaning of is check it in the dictionary, look it up in the dictionary. But what kind of dictionary is that, right? That's the thing. And the problem is that some people complain about the quality of classes, language classes, because they say that the professors don't assist them in what they need or they're not corrected. What they expect is someone to tell them this part on the false cognates. Now you're using the inappropriate word. Probably you have the bilingual dictionary definition, but that's not the one that you need to use at this point. So they need someone to tell them a little bit of the cultural information. That's what's missing in many places. So hence, here's the importance of traveling. Here's the importance of being exposed to a foreign contexts, so as to leave the culture and being able to tell someone that they're making not necessarily a mistake, but they're misusing a term. Take a look at this one. Fulano de tal. So John Doe. Okay? John Doe. Función corrida. So all day program. Or repeated showings. Right? Some people had a hard time translating sala de cine. Sala de cine. I'd like to ask you, how would you provide a translation or some rendering for sala de cine? Well, someone, I'm just going to cut short and make this story short. Someone would say, "Oh, the movie theater." Yeah, that was back in the 70s and 80s when we had like one movie theater and one screen. Now, since this business has gone so competitive, there are different screens inside the same, venue. So how you call that place? Well, they needed a new term. Now they say it's a multiplex. It's a multiplex. And by multiplex, what they mean is a multiple screen showings at the same time simultaneously. So, uh, so these are kind of hard to explain for someone who hasn't seen what it is like, right? And so it goes with everything in which technology gets involved, right? And alters traditional processes. Okay. I don't know if you have a comment or you'd like to add something in that regard. All right. If not, I'm moving into a bit of Anglicisms and Hispanicisms. I'm going to try to move forward a bit concerning this topic. Now, before I get started, I'd like to ask you, what do you understand as an Anglicism? Or Hispanicism, if you would like to contribute at this point, and you haven't spoken yet, it will be a very good thing for me to see your name here that you are trying to define or predict, right? To some extent, what where this discussion is going, right? So my question is this: what is an Anglicism or what is a Hispanicism?
Well, Anglicisms coming from English, words coming from English, and Hispanisms from Spanish.
Oh, could you say that again, Professor? I could hardly listen to you. Could you say that again?
Oh, sorry, because sorry. Anglicisms are word coming from English, and Hispanisms from Spanish during translation.
Yeah, and what do you think justifies their existence? That's my bottom line, question here. What do you think justifies their existence? Why do we need Anglicisms, or why do we need to live with them? Anglicism and Hispanicisms.
Well, for example, now with technological advances, there are words that are used in English and they are commonly also used in Spanish. Meanwhile, we wait for the proper diccionarios de la Real Academia de la Lengua Española just to say something about it. People start using the words in English and in Spanish at the same time. So we are living with this up to date.
So what you're saying is that technology is forcing us to speak English?
So just with the word selfie, we are still using selfie, and selfie is a word that's just much common today. Everybody knows what it is, but it's not a Spanish word in reality. So when we translate, we need to know that.
Yeah, once I had a student who asked me, why do I have to learn how to speak like a gringo? That's the question the student asked me. He asked me that, and I told him, what do you mean speak like a gringo? He says, well, you're forcing us to speak English. It's not me, I told him. It's the context that's forcing you to speak English. Why do we have to learn so much English here? Why? It's because if you don't know English, you don't understand the world. That was my answer. You don't understand the world. So what do you mean? He said, and I told him, look, if you want to understand the stock market, if you want to know how to fix your car, and what parts to buy. And if you want to read a manual for installing any piece of equipment, if you need to go online and get a manual on how to fix something at home, or you want to do it yourself and you don't want people to lie to you, if you need to fix your air conditioner, if you're too hot in your room and your air conditioner is not working and you need to get something for that, and if you have to go to do it center or novi and you want to read find out what the difference between the different appliances are, or the pieces of electronic equipment or electrical components that could be, for protecting some appliances and so forth, anything, you need English, because if you don't know English, you don't understand the world. And this is part of the story. In the United States, it's the same thing. There are certain things they can't speak about because they are in Spanish. Of course, they do speak and use a lot of Spanish terms. Okay, you're gonna listen to an American person speaking with lots of Spanish words. I was just watching Fox News like 2 days ago, and there was this former FBI director named Dan Bongino. He was speaking. Half of what he said during his interview was in Spanish. And even though we know that there is a rejection toward the Latino community right now in the US, they have to speak in Spanish because many of the things that are happening in that country involve Spanish somehow. Okay, either through the people, the culture, the identity, anything, business, migration, etc. So yeah, that is why we're forced to live with Anglicisms and Hispanicisms, is that the context is really forcing us to speak about some topics that are foreign. Now, what does translation do in order to turn something foreign into something uh, owned, that you borrow it? You domesticate the terminology. That's what translation does, or a good translator does. Domesticates foreign terms. So this domestication process is part of the Anglicism, Hispanicism. So there are certain pieces that they just don't belong, but they have to go somewhere, and they become domesticated. Okay? That's domestication of terminology. So yeah, it's a way to put it, right? I don't know if you have any other comment to say before we get started here.
Just I have another comment regarding the word parquear. So it comes from parking, but now estacionar, parking, people use parking, but now it has another connotative meaning regarding the way young people just hang out together. So also this is very interesting to see how this meaning, how the meaning, how meaning would change according also to the context.
Right, right. At the Spanish department at the faculty, well, we've taken all those Spanish courses. They have three categories. They have Anglicismos, Hispanicismos, Barbarismos. So yeah, they, in the defense of the Spanish language, instead of saying parquear, they say that's a barbaric way of speaking, because what you're doing is that you are bringing in a foreign term that you're domesticating. From a perspective of language experts of a field like Spanish teachers, for them this is a barbarism, so to put it. Okay, but for translation, there is nothing barbaric about saying parquear. You're domesticating, if domesticating a foreign term at a point in which you don't have an equivalent form. Okay, so this is a process, and languages evolve. So we cannot say like something is right, something is wrong. We cannot just say that, like something is a barbarism. Okay, I'm sure you've listened to the word. I'm sure. I'm moving on. So language interference. This is it. This is the key word here when we talk about Anglicisms in Spanish. For example, to start referring to one of them. So languages affect each other, right? And languages in direct geographic contact can significantly change each other's lexicon, phonology, syntax, and style. There's usually a dominant and a subordinate language, okay? And this is not something that I made up. This is in any book on comparative linguistics, on translation, on intercultural communication, cross-cultural communication, anything under any of those headings, you will run into this very same theory. Put it one way or the other, coming from one other author or the other, that there is usually a dominant and a subordinate language. Depending on the inherent characteristics of each language and the political and cultural circumstances, okay? We cannot deny, for example, that English is a dominant language. We started talking about diplomacy, and we began with French and we ended up with English, not Spanish. People are not learning Spanish to communicate with other cultures. They're doing it because they're probably trying to live in a Spanish-speaking country, or maybe they have some business going on with Spanish. But it's not a major language for communication at a government level among regions, right? That is not happening with Spanish at present, but English is at that, has gained that status, right? That's what we're referring to. Since these languages become so important, um, depending on the inherent characteristics of each language and their circumstances, for instance, the language spoken in the capital of an imperial power, okay, will exercise strong influences on those other languages within the sphere of influence of the empire. So this takes us to Brakakru and global Englishes theory, right? According to his theory, you'll know that the capital or the central core, or at least the core of the English language, is the L1 countries, where English is learned and spoken as a first language, right? And those centers, they, pass on or transmit their culture to the outer rims or realms of this concentric circle type of construction, cultural construction. So places like the UK and the United States, and same as in Canada or Australia, they export their language and their culture to other parts of the world. And there is even this other outer circle. There's this inner circle where the dominant L1 spoken languages prevail with their culture, their own identity and culture. They export that over. And how do they do that? Through media, books, literature, etc. You name whatever it is that they are communicating. And that even goes beyond those middle circles and outer circles, right? So this is something that is passing on. For example, okay, and here at the bottom we read that border areas are specifically prolific areas for language interaction, as are linguistic enclaves within a nation. So one of the reasons why, for example, here in Panama, people speak much more English than in other places like Colombia, just to give an example, is because of the canal, right? And the canal zone, former canal zone. This is still in the news and still in the top of mind of American people. This disappeared 25 around 25, 30 years ago, but it's still in the top of mind of the American people. They're still thinking about it. Okay. And they can escape that situation, that scenario, right? Because the United States is an empire. That's why. So they used to have a dominion over a territory that doesn't belong to them anymore. So how could they keep on calling themselves an empire? That's part of that situation that also transpires into language. So politics, social, economic aspects, they are also connected to language. So, sure, comments, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Now that you're speaking about that, I just last semester I was teaching like linguistic, introduction to linguistic, and now whatever you're speaking about it comes to mind like man like language is dynamic, and as there was one of the professors who was speaking before, and he was speaking like parking, and when it comes to that subject I was telling most students like that right now we can see many english word that those english word come from technology, and when we try to translate them it sounds like, okay, for example, just one example is gamification. So how you translate gamification into Spanish? And that is part of technology. Okay, that word is part of technology, but how we translate that word into Spanish? So I don't see like a big difference when you try to translate that into Spanish, like gamification, and also so many other words. It's not just gamification, but some other word that comes from technology that when you're trying to translate it's not a big difference when you compare them from Spanish to English.
Well, thank you very much for that comment. Exactly. That's pretty much the tone on the topic of this content that we're presenting today at this time. Uh, uh, Languages are very dynamic. Exactly. They're evolving. Why is it? Because they evolve with the people. So as people evolve and have needs, languages will evolve and behave so.
And also with whatever issue is going on around, because we talk many words from revolution and industrialization and now technology, which is the one that's going on right now.
Yeah, let me tell you what happened to me this past semester. Students had to deliver a presentation on something that had to do with politics. I think it was something about political parties or something. Some There was a student who stood and said, "Professor, you know what? I'm not going to say my presentation because I don't like politics and I don't feel okay speaking about any of that." Well, I tried to coax him into participating for the sake of his grade, first of all, and secondly, because I explained to him that we are at a university and we speak about any of those topics and we speak about all of those, and that they shouldn't think that politics, social and economic, and even moral matters connect to language. We tend not to see that connection, but they are all a part of it. What the thing is, language is probably a much more visible form of communication, especially when it is written and when people talk about certain topics. But underlying all of that talk and all of that writing, there is all the politics, there is all the social matters, there is all the scientific and other topics that are part of the world, the overall world dynamics. So this is important, and we need to be aware of this. That is in this slide. Spanish is for emotional expression, okay, and English is more for science, technology, and business, okay. So as you read here, one would expect English to penetrate Spanish in matters of science and technology, especially when the pioneering research and development work of the field takes place in the English language, U.S. Laboratories, factories, etc. So, for example, just to bring a case, a case in point, when we speak about the pandemic, all of that vocabulary comes from the English-speaking world because they were the ones who knew where the virus originated. I'm talking about the COVID, SARS, COVID. They knew where it was manufactured. They knew what the cure was, and now they're accusing Fauci, Dr. Fauci. You can watch all those trials on TV, and look, I'm surprised. They handled everything. So the topic was fully in English because it was an American topic, and the Chinese, of course, they remained silent, but they were also culprits and participated in the development of those SARS-CoV viruses, because the American labs were in China, and they keep on accusing each other about what was really going on. We will never know, really, but this is similar to what happened with Oppenheimer and the nuclear bomb. Okay, if you haven't watched that movie, I strongly recommend you watch that movie, because what happened to Dr. Fauci today is the same thing that happened to Oppenheimer during the time of the nuclear bomb. After nuclear bomb was um, uh, used in Japan, because they used it twice. So this is serious. A lot of these topics are in English, and the vocabulary is English. Okay, I cannot go any further because of time limitations. 11:58. I would like to invite the seminar and certificate program managers to go ahead with the closing now that we're left only 2 minutes, and I'm going to leave it at this, and we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Rafael Cardenas, for this wonderful input that we got on today. And I urge the participants to please complete the registration, your attendance registration for today, and that we connect to Classroom so that we can follow up on the assignment that Professor Rafael uploaded. And for today, this is all, but I urge Professor Marisol if she has something else to add.
Well, nothing else. Just good afternoon. Have a good day today. Enjoy your assignment.
I'm sorry, I missed the registration because I was disconnecting several times, so I don't have the link. Can somebody send me the link?
Oh, yes. Just give me a second. Let me check. They actually, I posted them in the chat room. They are there. Just they're above your last comment in the chat room, Lucy. Right there. That's the link.
No, the problem is that I disconnected when I was supposed to take the link.
Just wait, let me post it again. There it is. Got it? I just posted it again, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. I got it now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me stop.